Hi. A few weeks ago, I noticed that my YouTube channel now has over 25,000 subscribers. That's pretty small compared to PewDiePie's standards, but it's still big enough to make me feel personally grateful that so many of you are willing to support my channel. And so, to start off a brand new year, I thought it'd be a good idea to express my appreciation to all of you subscribers and viewers by making a video about my whole approach to YouTube. First at the level of my basic motivations and goals, and then at the level of what I do and do not do when I make these videos for you. Of course, it's probably already obvious that I can't lay claim to being any kind of expert in the ways of YouTube, especially since I'm just a guy who's making things up as he goes along. So, if any of you have any ideas about how I might improve what I'm doing, I'd certainly like to hear them. Anyhow, here's the usual roadmap of the material in this video for your perusal and edification. I'll just leave it up for a few seconds. Pause if you want to. Okay, so let me begin by talking for a few minutes about my underlying motivations and goals. At the most general level, one of my motivations for making these videos has to do with contributing to what I think is the most revolutionary historical event in my lifetime: the invention and proliferation of the internet and related digital telecommunications technologies. In my experience, we're living in times that are unprecedented and whose effects permeate many important dimensions of our everyday lives. Our immediate access to information, our ability to communicate more or less instantaneously with each other, and the way that new ideas are created and molded and disseminated across the social terrain. Of course, I'm personally old enough to remember another dramatic moment in human history: watching the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. And sure, it was definitely a spellbinding experience, especially for a 9-year-old watching it on live TV. But to me, that was really nothing compared to what we're experiencing now, especially with regard to how it's influencing our everyday lives. So, part of my general motivation for making YouTube videos has to do with the fact that I feel a very personal desire to engage and participate in what I perceive is an extremely important, exciting, and historically significant reality. Actually, the historically significant reality of my lifetime so far. And perhaps the most miraculous part of that has to do with how technological evolution has now made it possible for everyday people to express ourselves easily via media like digital video. For instance, I made my first 40 or so YouTube videos with no training and for the total cost of no dollars. I just downloaded a free version of the old MS Movie Maker and started running. That's all it took. Now that, to me, is miraculous. Then, after a couple years, my wife bought me some real software, a real microphone, and a digital camera so that I could actually appear as a live human being in my videos rather than just a disembodied voice. But the point is that it's a truly amazing world where we, regular everyday people, can do these sorts of things and express ourselves creatively and share our perspectives and expertise with the larger world, all without having to take out a second mortgage. And so another part of my general motivation has to do with the excitement I feel in being able to participate in an amazing, newly emerging creative medium and the newly emerging world that's being born right along with it. Beyond all of that, though, I feel like I've benefited tremendously in a more personal way from other people's YouTube videos. And so I feel a pretty intense desire to give back in whatever way I can, to offer whatever gift I can to the system from which I've received so much. For instance, I feel a lot of that kind of gratitude when I have to fix something mechanical, a car, an appliance, whatever, and I only semi-know what I'm doing. What an incredible, almost indescribable blessing it is to see the job being done and explained by some generous soul who took the time and energy to make a YouTube video about it. Again, because of my age, I've spent many years in the past struggling to decipher the esoteric glyphs and arcane diagrams found in Chilton's manuals, for those of you who are old school enough to remember them, And so I feel like I can tell you with some authority that the world has definitely changed a lot since then. And man, I feel a lot of gratitude for those changes. So much so that I'm eager to give back in whatever way I can. So at one level, my YouTube videos are my personal way of trying to do just that. However, at another level, my motivation also has to do with the current state of the academic world, which is where I've been working for the last 25 years or so. Basically, it seems to me that academe is having some real difficulties adapting itself to the realities of the 21st century. As my wife sometimes puts it, we academicians need to stop parading around in our powdered wigs. Part of what she means, I think, is that we're still operating mostly according to an antiquated, fairly insular paradigm that's no longer very congruent with the increasingly egalitarian technological world we're actually inhabiting. Basically, we're still wearing figurative powdered wigs because we're refusing to reinvent the ways we produce and disseminate knowledge to bring them into alignment with the world's emerging realities. Instead, a lot of our intellectual activity remains confined, as it's always been, to small privileged cliques of professorial cognoscenti, and is disseminated mostly to our select acolytes, young students who are fortunate enough to be able to attend formal classes in colleges and universities. But the reality of today's world is that when people really need to learn something, even very complicated things, at least 98% of the time, they probably aren't looking to academe, but to technological artifacts like YouTube and to the internet more generally. And the obvious fact is that you can learn a hell of a lot about calculus or history or philosophy or psychology or any other traditionally academic discipline just by absorbing the material you can easily find in YouTube videos. And for zero cost! At the same time, it seems like academe's main function in our world is drifting more and more toward merely regulating and controlling credentials for the job market. Basically, a bureaucratic task rather than pursuing the deep life of mind. This seems like a sad misdirection to me. And so part of my personal involvement with YouTube is animated by the desire to explore new vistas for the academic world, to experiment with new ways of engaging in intellectual activity that are much more egalitarian and freely accessible, and much less encumbered by unnecessary elitism and bureaucracy, and that are consequently much more congruent with the realities of the 21st century. That seems important to me because my perception is that if we academicians really want to remain a vital force for positive change in our world and avoid degenerating into mere credentialing mechanisms, we need to find new ways of making what we do accessible and relevant to significant fractions of the human race and not merely to the cloistered and privileged few. And so, with those four very general motivations circulating in the back of my mind, I started my YouTube channel in 2014 with the immediate goal of helping my students master the material they were learning in my classes and then helping them succeed more generally in college, especially so that they'd be able to build a solid academic foundation for their later professional careers. But since that time, the focus of my YouTube videos has broadened quite a bit. And so I now make videos on many varied topics, basically on whatever is interesting to me at the time. For instance, during the last year I've made videos on the nature of happiness, how to exercise, the psychology of chess, psychedelic experience, free speech, stand-up comedy, and many other sundry topics. However, even my most extravagant peregrinations, such as the video I made on the psychology of the zombie apocalypse, always remain anchored in my intellectual home, which is in psychology and philosophy, and more specifically, in phenomenology, existentialism, humanistic psychology, and Buddhism. However, throughout all that, my underlying goal is, and always has been, simply to speak the truth as it appears to me. For that reason, I've never monetized any of my videos or embedded sponsored advertisements in them or solicited donations through mechanisms like Patreon. The reason is that I know myself well enough to recognize that if there were money at stake, it would probably start to skew what I do toward trying to optimize my popularity, and hence toward trying to increase my monetary intake. But all things considered, I'd rather remain faithful to my innermost desire, which, like I said, is simply to speak the truth as I'm experiencing it, with as much artistry, poetry, and passion as I can. Basically, I don't want monetary enticements to interfere with that because, well, speaking the truth is what I actually care about. And while the effect of taking money for my videos may be subtle, I'm pretty sure that I would feel it and know it, at least in my own heart. And so I consistently avoid engaging in the whole monetary aspect of YouTube. Anyhow, in light of Patreon's recent misbehavior, it's also become increasingly apparent to me that if you're expecting some kind of paycheck for telling the truth, you'll always be subject to manipulation and control by whoever's holding the purse strings. So, all things considered, in my mind, it's best just to cut all of that out of the equation. Okay, another thing I don't do in my videos, even though many YouTubers do, is make some kind of sales pitch to try to get people to subscribe to my channel and or to give my videos a thumbs up. First, I feel like that just wastes people's time. After all, I'm pretty sure that you're all perfectly capable of deciding for yourselves whether you want to subscribe to someone's channel or not. It ain't rocket science. And so, I don't feel like there's much sense in badgering people about it. And anyhow, if people end up subscribing to my channel, I want them to do it out of their own desire, and not just because I've managed to pester them into doing something they wouldn't otherwise do. And yet another thing I don't do, again, because I think it just wastes people's time, is insert a slick 10 or 15 second graphic accompanied by some sort of musical jingle into the beginning of all of my videos. When I first started making videos, I used to do a primitive version of that, mostly because that's what a lot of other YouTubers were doing. But then I noticed that when I watch other people's videos, I almost always just skip past their fancy introductory graphics to get to the actual content, and that I'm usually mildly annoyed by having to go through all of that rigmarole. So when I realized that, I started doing what I do now. I start almost all my videos by just saying hi and then immediately launching into the video's content. That's basically because I don't want to waste your time with filler that may look and sound impressive, but that actually does very little to enhance your overall experience. And this brings me to something I do in my videos that I haven't seen any other YouTuber doing. I put a fairly detailed table of contents with timestamps near the start of almost all my videos. Probably there's at least one other person somewhere in YouTube land who does that, but I haven't encountered that person yet. So as far as I know, I'm the only one doing it. Anyhow, I've been including these roadmaps, as I like to call them, in my last 30 or so videos, and I've also recently started putting them in the description portion of my videos so that you can simply click on any of the timestamps and immediately skip to whatever part of the video you want to see. Although it definitely takes more work to do all of that, I do it for two reasons. First, I want to give you a good idea up front about what's in the video, mostly so that you can judge for yourself whether it's going to be worth your time to watch it. And second, I do it so that you can easily skip to one particular part of the video if you so desire. But here again, my overall goal is to do what I can to avoid wasting your time. That's basically because I see your time as something valuable and precious. After all, every moment of our lives is, well, something unique and unduplicatable, and something that we can never get back once it's passed. And the further existential fact is that we only have a very limited number of those moments before we have to exit this world. So for me, it's important to try to live each moment of our lives as well as we can. And as a consequence, when I make my videos, I don't want to waste your time because, well, I don't want to waste your life. Not even a small fraction of it. But beyond that, I'm personally deeply honored by your willingness to have contact with my world and to share a small portion of this human adventure with me. I see that as something, well, as something sacred, as something truly worthy of my own best efforts in this life. And for me, that's most especially true in the domain of writing and linguistic expression. I'm not sure if it comes through in my videos, but there's a poet that breathes deep inside of me. And so one reason I make these videos, maybe the biggest reason, is to share that with you. Basically, it's my way of trying to give the best of myself to you and to the world more generally. You see, there comes a point when life isn't so much about getting what we can get, but about giving what we can give. And at the end of the day, I'm deeply grateful for what you give to me, the opportunity to see what I can give to you. So thanks, yes, many, many thanks to each and every one of you for that. Yeah, I know that I joke around a lot in my videos, but I'm being pretty serious right now. So I hope you can feel that. Anyhow, many sincere thanks, as always, for watching. And remember to take care of your soul. Bye-bye.